Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Adventures in Spacetime. I apologize for the long delay between not feeling well myself, lots of overtime at work, then just this past weekend celebrating my wife's and I 5th year anniversary. So get down right to it. This won't be a very long video due to my lack of knowledge on this particular subject, as well as very few facts, actual quote unquote facts that I can find online in a library. But this is going to be about the supposed simulation hypothesis. Some call it a theory. I prefer the term hypothesis due to the fact that there really is no real way of determining whether this particular hypothesis is true or not without being able to see down to the smallest possible level, which is the Planck length, which current technology is impossible to do. But with the simulation hypothesis, what it states basically is that there's a high probability that we live in a um, very advanced simulation created by some unknown factor, i.e., a future civilization, extraterrestrial civilization, which personally I don't subscribe to. Well, I do believe there might be extraterrestrials out there, but whether they came here to Earth or not, I seriously doubt it. But that's for another time. So basically, in many works of science fiction, as well as some forecasts by several prominent futurists and scientific enthusiasts, they predict that enormous amounts of computing power will be available in the far future, i.e., with quantum computing or some other more advanced means than what we currently have in today's day and age. Let's suppose for a moment that these predictions are correct about being inside a simulation. Simulation. Sorry, can't read my glasses on. Need new glasses, so oh well. The one thing that future generations might do with their super powerful computers or quantum computers or some other futuristic type of computing power they might have is to run a very detailed simulation of their ancestors, an ancestral simulation. Uh, Sort of like playing a video game like Halo or Grand Theft Auto, where that because of their computers, which would be extremely powerful, they could run a great many of simulations, like similar to what we do now, where that we have our supercomputers running various simulations of the solar system, universe, evolution, and such. And kind of like a video game, let's assume that the characters that we play in a video game could be what they would perceive as conscious. Um, as they would be if the simulation was sufficiently fine grained enough in that it could be certain quite widely accepted position in the philosophy of the original race just conducting the simulation. Uh, Put it in layman's terms, let's say you're playing a video game, like I said before, and your character is Like, its personal definition is conscience, where that you know for a fact that it is not conscience, but is instead bits of zeros and ones. So, moving on, it could be the case that the vast majority of minds like ours don't belong to the original race, but rather to people simulated by advanced descendants of an original race or some other race that's conducting experiments of what the universe was like prior to a particular time. Philosophically speaking, that could raise some issues, but that's for another time, another video, perhaps. Just put in the context. Let's say, to me, this coffee cup is real. But if it is indeed a simulation, then how do we know this is real? Or let's imagine that we have an apple in my hand. Okay? Yeah, I can see there's nothing there, but if it was a simulation, then one can just be popped up, perhaps. Now, futurists like Elon Musk, um, scientists like Neil Tyson, uh, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe Stephen Hawking might have brought a point at one point where that they all believe that the possibility of us being inside a simulation is 999% to 1%, or the fact that we are not living in a simulation is 1 out of a billion, or something similar to that effect. Now, there's an assumption of a substrate independence, a common assumption in the philosophy of mind, that is, of the substrate independence. The idea of that is that mental states can supervene on any broadcast physical substrates, like consciousness, provided a simple implements the right sort of computational structures and processes. Say, if your computer was powerful enough to create such a finely detailed simulation, would it be possible right now? No. It can be associated with a conscious experience. It is not essential. It is not an essential property of consciousness that is implemented on carbon-based biological neural networks, brains, inside a cranium. Silicon-based processors inside a computer could, in principle, do the trick as well. The computers become, right now, computers are intellectually the equivalent of an ant, the basic home PC. Supercomputers can be more advanced, especially used in governments or space agencies. Arguments for this thesis has been given in the literature, and although it's not entirely uncontroversial, we we can take it as it is given. The argument the argument does not, however, depend on any strong version of functionalism or computing power. For example, we don't need to assume that the thesis of substrate independence is necessarily true, either analytically or metaphysically. Just that, in fact, a computer running a suitable program, by its own definition, could be conscious. So consciousness can be imitated, emulated into a computer program. Moreover, we may or may not assume that in order to create a mind on a computer, or to be able to imitate a computing power brain, which by itself, the human brain is the most complex computer on the planet by analytical standards. So in order for us to imitate or even get to the point where that we can emulate a human brain on a computer, that would take massive amounts of computing power, which we currently do not have. At our current stage of technological development, we don't have either sufficient powerful hardware, or the requisite software to create conscious minds in computers. That's pretty much what it is stated. But persuasive arguments have been given to the effect that if technological progress continues unabated, then these shortcomings will eventually be overcome, which directs to Moore's Law, where that computing power will double every couple of years, a couple of months, couple of years. But with the advent of quantum computing, Moore's laws might be subverted or become null and void, as it were. Some authors of both science fiction and papers concerning simulation hypothesis argued that this stage may only be a few decades away, with the advent of quantum computing, which I foresee to be much more advanced than what we currently have, given the fact we can perfect it. Which right now, based on everything that I've read thus far, quantum computing is still at its infancy. So in order for it to even rival that of personal PCs would take some time, months, maybe years, to eventually get it to the point where that it can create its own simulations. It could years, decades, centuries, if it's even possible. Which in turn, if you think about it, the simulation hypothesis, if it is true, then that would mean that the civilization that created simulation would not only be millions or billions more advanced than us, but theoretically, they would be closer towards the end of their universe, i.e., colder temperatures allows for better computational properties in computers. The simulation argument works equally well for those who think that it will take hundreds of thousands of years to reach a quote-unquote post-human stage of civilization where humankind has acquired most of the technological capabilities that one can currently show to be consistent with physical laws of material and energy constraints. Which, based on all predictions up thus far, that would be possible, but hundreds of thousands of years from now, as this paper just stated. Excuse me. The core of the simulation argument. The basic idea of the hypothesis can be expressed roughly as this follows. If there were a substantial chance that our civilization would ever get to the quote-unquote post-human stage and run many ancestor simulations then how come you're not living in such a simulation? The idea is developed into a rigorous argument. So, giving these notations, a fraction of all human level technological civilizations that survive to reach a post-human stage, or if such civilizations make it past various natural barriers that allows them to reach that stage. And included in there with the average number of ancestor simulations run by such civilizations, the average number of individuals that had lived in a civilization before it reaches post-human stage. Now, going back to the video game analogy, say Skyrim, Halo, GTA, when you're playing that character, the only thing that is real in that game is what you currently see in 360 degrees, or close to it, anything in front of you. You turn around, there's nothing behind you, but the computer, the gaming console, creates a basic format. And say you're running along a certain path, a street path, then you go to another one, the one you're previously on gets stored away, gets deleted, till you come back to it. But moving on, personally, I find the simulation hypothesis to be rather confusing, but it is a decent subject to try to bring forth, at least something to spark some sort of debate. Now, contrary to popular belief, this is not about religion, this is about scientific possibilities. So, tell me what you think about the simulation hypothesis. Do you think it is real? Do you think it's possible? Or do you think, like some other failed ventures, it can just go by the wayside? In my next video, I would like to discuss about the holographic universe hypothesis, which sounds more realistic as compared to the simulation hypothesis, due to the fact that we live in a three-dimensional world imprinted on a four-dimensional plane, i.e. space-time. So in the meantime, put down some comments what you think the simulation hypothesis means to you, whether you think it is real or if it is another offshoot of bad science. So until next time, this is Bernard. See you later.